It's late at night, and I'm alone in my apartment, just trying to rest from a migraine that's been hanging over me for days. Then, there's a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, I didn't want to see anyone. But when I peek through the peephole and see my younger sister, Daphne, and her fiancé, Marco, standing there, I freeze. They're both in distress, her face blotchy, tears streaming, and Marco's all dramatic, playing the worried fiancé. The problem they're about to tell me they're being evicted. They need my help. But something about the way they're acting feels off, like they think I'll just jump in and fix it. And that's when I remember what I overheard at my dad's birthday party, how they were laughing about how dumb I was, thinking they'd ever pay me back. Suddenly, everything clicks. And I realize this isn't just a late night crisis. This is a game, and they think I'm their fool. But here's where it gets really interesting. You're going to want to stick around for what happens next. Trust me. 3 days. 3 days of a migraine that wouldn't quit. A relentless, icy throb behind my right eye that felt like it was drilling into my skull. I had tried everything. Darkened rooms, a damp cloth pressed to my forehead, painkillers that did nothing but make my stomach churn. But the ache remained, as stubborn as the stress that had been building in my life. I'd been a university registrar for what felt like forever, and every semester, the workload seemed to grow heavier. The end of the semester was always my personal nightmare, a flurry of final grades, academic probations, and endless student emails demanding answers I had no time to give. My brain felt like it had been run through the ringer, dried out, and tossed aside. I just finished processing grades for over 6,000 students, each one a small crisis in its own right. Add to that the academic probation notices I had to review, and I was drowning. I was 36, single, and in all honesty, I had no idea what life outside of my job even looked like anymore. My primary relationship was with my spreadsheets. They didn't judge me. They didn't ask for anything except precision. They were calm, ordered, and predictable. Unlike the rest of my life. At home, my apartment was my sanctuary. The only place where everything made sense. It was small, cozy, and practical. With secondhand furniture I had picked up here and there, there was a quietness to it that I had worked hard to maintain. It was a simple one-bedroom. The kind of place that didn't need a lot of attention but gave me the peace I desperately craved. It was the only space where I could shut the door on the world and just exist for a moment. My little corner of sanity in a life that had become chaotic. But even here, my mind raced. The migraine kept pressing against my skull, making it hard to think, let alone focus on anything else. I had been sitting in my darkened living room, a damp cloth draped over my forehead, phone silenced, ringer off. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that kept me company. I had wanted to be alone. I needed to be. But the solitude, the silence felt suffocating. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the noise in my head. I was just starting to drift into a restless, headache-fueled stupor when the doorbell rang. It was sharp, insistent jarring in the silence. I blinked, disoriented. Who could be at my door? I ignored it at first, hoping whoever it was would just go away. Maybe they'd leave a note or a package and move on. I didn't want to deal with anything or anyone. But then came the pounding. It wasn't a polite knock or even a, "Hey, I'm here," tap on the door. No, this was frantic, urgent banging, the kind that rattled the frame and made my stomach clench. It wasn't just someone knocking. It was a demand for my attention. I sighed, pushing myself off the couch. Every step felt like a chore as my head throbbed with each movement. My apartment felt like it was spinning around me. I dragged myself to the door, my legs heavy, my mind foggy. I peeked through the peephole, and there they were, my younger sister Daphne and her fiancé Marco. I had to blink a few times to make sure I was seeing clearly. Daphne's face was blotchy, her eyes red from crying. She was standing close to Marco, who had his arm around her, his expression a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just worry, it was the kind of performance you put on for an audience. Marco was a master of theatrics, always showing off in front of others, acting the part of the caring partner. His face was too calm, too composed, like he already knew what he expected from me. My stomach churned. I didn't want to open the door. I really didn't, but I knew I had to. There was no avoiding it. I unlocked the deadbolt, slid the chain off, and opened the door, keeping the chain latched. It was late, well past 10 p.m., and I had no idea why they were here, but something felt wrong. I could feel my heart rate increase as the door creaked open, the weight of what was about to unfold settling on me. "Daphne, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice flat, betraying none of the tension that was starting to bubble up inside me. My migraine flared in response, making it hard to focus, but I had to keep it together. I had to. And then she started crying, her voice coming out in a wail that was more frantic than I had ever heard. "Aggie, you have to help us. The landlord, he's kicking us out." She was pushing against the door, as if trying to force her way in. I didn't know how to react, so I just stood there, staring at her. Marco jumped in then, his voice smooth, urgent, far too calm for the situation. "Agatha, please, we just got the notice," he said, his tone more rehearsed than I would have liked. "It's on the door. We have 3 days. 3 days. We have nowhere to go." I didn't know what to say. Something about their panic didn't feel right. It was too performed. It was too over the top. I wasn't sure what was happening, but my gut told me that something was off. The last 3 words hit me like a splash of cold water. "You didn't pay the rent." I froze. I didn't understand. I had given them the money for the rent. Like always, on the 1st of the month. I had always made sure the money was sent, even when it meant I couldn't afford much for myself. But here they were, standing in my doorway, claiming I had forgotten to pay. I felt my chest tighten as everything in me told me something was wrong. I stared at them both through the small gap in the door. Daphne, my 27-year-old sister, who owned an Etsy shop that never seemed to make any real money. Marco, 30, the startup founder who had been working on a web app that still wasn't functional after 2 years. 8 months. For 8 months. I had been paying their rent on this trendy downtown loft they had found. 8 months of me pulling double shifts, canceling my vacation plans, eating cheap noodles, just so they could save for their wedding and get on their feet. But now this. Now. They were telling me they couldn't pay rent, and they were blaming me. I felt something snap inside me. I wasn't just tired anymore. I wasn't just overwhelmed by my job and the migraine. I was being played. I'd been played. I felt an icy calmness take over. "I don't understand," I said, my voice flat. I tried to keep the anger from seeping through, but it was hard. "I gave you the money for this month. I transferred it on the 1st. Like always. I don't understand." Daphne's voice rose to a screech. "No, you didn't," she cried, her eyes wide with panic. "I checked the account. The money's not there. How could you do this to us? Aggie, we're family." I looked at her, really looked at her. The designer handbag she was clutching, the new sneakers Marco had on his feet, it was all too much. It wasn't just that they hadn't paid rent. It was the lies. The way they expected me to just hand over more money, without question, without any consideration for everything I had already done for them. I thought about everything I had sacrificed for them, everything I had done to help them out. And in that moment, the truth became clear. They weren't just asking for help. They were taking advantage of me, and I had been too blind to see it. I closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. They both looked startled, as if they had been expecting me to either yell or break down in tears and write a check on the spot. But I didn't. I didn't do either. I just stood there. "Come in," I said, my voice cold, betraying nothing of what I was feeling inside. "We need to talk." They stepped past me, looking confused, as if the script they had rehearsed in their heads wasn't going quite as planned. As they walked into my apartment, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction, and they thought I was their safety net. They thought I was their fool, but they had no idea what I had been doing for the last few weeks. The moment they sat down on my sofa, the same sofa I had put off replacing for months, because I had been too busy paying their bills, I felt my resolve harden. I had spent the last 3 weeks learning everything I could. They had no idea what I had uncovered, no idea what I had been planning, and the betrayal I felt was worse than any migraine could ever be. The moment they crossed the threshold into my apartment, something shifted. I could feel it in the air, like the tension had gone from a dull buzz to a low hum, vibrating with expectation. They both plopped onto my sofa like it was their throne, and I watched them settle in. Daphne still wiping at her eyes, and Marco leaning forward, elbows on his knees, his face the perfect picture of calculated concern. I watched them carefully, a strange calmness washing over me, the kind of calm that comes when you finally see things for what they truly are. I'd been running on fumes for the past few days, fueled by stress, by exhaustion, by a migraine that felt like it was making my brain ache with every thought. But now, in this moment, something else surged inside me. Clarity, the exhaustion, the headache, it all faded into the background. This wasn't about my migraine or the weeks of stress anymore. This was something bigger. This was about them, about me, and about the way they thought they could control me, manipulate me, use me without consequence. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. They thought they could walk in here, make their demands, and I would just bend to their will, but I wasn't going to play that game anymore. Daphne was the first to speak. "Aggie, I just don't know what we're going to do," she whimpered, her voice still thick with fake tears. She glanced around my modest apartment, clearly judging the worn furniture, the bookshelves full of textbooks and old knickknacks, the simple decor. I saw the way her eyes flicked over everything, as if trying to figure out where the money had gone, where the good life was hidden. She wasn't used to this kind of life. She wasn't used to the responsibility of paying her own bills or making hard decisions. "The landlord is a monster," she said, her voice soft but laced with desperation. "If we're not out by Friday, he's changing the locks and throwing our stuff on the street." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Just a little. Of course. That was what she would say. "He can't legally do that without a court order," I said flatly, my voice steady, betraying none of the anger simmering beneath. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, grabbing the kettle to make some tea. I needed to keep my hands busy, to keep myself grounded as the storm started to break. They could say whatever they wanted, but I had the upper hand now. I had the facts, the receipts, and the power to make them face reality. For once, they weren't going to pull the wool over my eyes. "He has to serve you a formal eviction notice, which gives you time to respond," I continued, keeping my back to them as I set the kettle on the stove, my hands moving with surprising precision. "A pay or quit notice is standard," Marco scoffed from the couch. I didn't need to look at him to know exactly how he was reacting. He wasn't interested in facts. He wasn't interested in the law. He was interested in getting my money and getting out of this situation without facing any real consequences. I could hear the disdain in his voice as he spoke. "Lawyers, courts, Agatha, we don't have time for that," he said, his tone dismissive, as if he was too busy for something as boring as legal processes. "We need the money now. You just need to call him in the morning and wire him this month's rent, plus the late fees, and probably next month's rent too, just to smooth things over." I froze. Kettle in hand, my fingers tightened around the handle, my pulse suddenly racing. Something inside me snapped, and that's when the full weight of the situation hit me like a brick wall. I had been paying their rent. I had been paying their bills for the last 8 months. And this was how they treated me. How they saw me as an easy mark, as an ATM to get whatever they wanted. They hadn't even bothered to try to fix the situation themselves. They had just assumed I would bail them out. Again. It hit me like a tidal wave, and I felt a surge of clarity. They weren't just asking for help. They weren't just in a tough spot. They had made their choices. And those choices, those irresponsible, reckless choices, had led them here. And now, they thought they could walk into my life, into my home, and demand I clean up their mess. It wasn't just about the rent anymore. It was about everything. Everything they had taken from me. I turned around slowly, the kettle still in my hand, my voice calm, almost too calm. "You want me to pay 2 months' rent?" I said, my words slow, measured, plus the late fees for a payment you were supposed to make. I stared at them both, watching the confusion flicker across their faces. They hadn't expected me to question them. They hadn't expected me to fight back. Daphne opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "No, Daphne," I said firmly. "A payment you were supposed to make." She looked at me, wide-eyed, as if the concept of responsibility had suddenly become foreign to her. She opened her mouth again, but Marco was quicker, snapping back at me with a little too much haste. "No, Aggie, a payment you were supposed to make," he said, his voice quick and sharp, trying to deflect. "You promised you'd help us until the wedding. You said you'd cover the rent so we could save for the deposit on the venue." I felt my temper flare, but I held it in check. I wasn't going to let them twist the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into feeling guilty. I promised I'd help you get on your feet, I said quietly, my voice low. I've been paying your rent for 8 months. That's $16,000. When I agreed to help, you both swore it was temporary. You both swore you were working, that Marco's app was about to get its first round of funding. Marco scoffed, a little too quickly. The facade was starting to crack. It is, he said, almost too defensively. These things take time. The VC guys are just finalizing the paperwork. He looked at me, the condescending smile back in place. You don't understand the startup world, Agatha. It's not like your little desk job. We're building an empire. I looked at him, staring him down. An empire built on my salary, I thought bitterly. But I didn't say it out loud. The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Daphne's fake crying sputtered to a stop, and I saw the real Daphne now, the one I had been blind to for so long. She wasn't the helpless, innocent younger sister I had always protected. She was a grown woman who had chosen this life, this lifestyle, and now she was reaping the consequences. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing, the victim act melting away. What is that supposed to mean? She asked, her voice turning cold. What are you saying, Aggie? And that's when it all clicked. That's when everything I had been too blind to see before finally came into focus. It means I'm tired. Daphne, I said, my voice steady but tinged with the anger I could no longer hide. I'm tired of working 60-hour weeks so you can sell 2 bracelets and Marco can network over expensive lunches. I'm tired of putting my entire life on hold. I'm tired of you both treating me like I'm your personal bank. I'm tired of cleaning up your messes. Her face twisted in disbelief, and she stood up, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. On hold, she scoffed. What life? Aggie, you don't have a life. You have a job. And this? She waved her hand around dismissively. This boring apartment, we're out there living, we're building a future. You should be happy to help. That's what family does. I stood there, staring at her, and for a moment, I felt the familiar shame wash over me. The old feeling that I was the boring, responsible older sister. The one who always had to pick up the pieces, the one who always had to provide. But then I remembered the things they had said behind my back. I remembered the sound of their laughter that night at Dad's birthday party. The words echoed in my head. She's too dumb to realize we'll never pay her back. I took a deep breath, pushing the memory down. Not yet, I told myself. The time wasn't right. I had to stick to the plan. I softened my voice, just enough to let them think they had won for a second. You're right, I said, my tone shifting. I'm sorry. I've been so stressed at work, and this migraine is killing me. I must have forgotten to set up the transfer. It's my fault. Daphne's face brightened immediately. She practically beamed, relieved. Oh, Aggie, thank God. I knew you wouldn't let us down. She smiled, wiping at her eyes again. So, you'll call him in the morning. You'll fix it. I smiled back, my face tight, exhausted. Of course, I said, giving her a weak, tired smile. I'll take care of everything. You two just go home and get some sleep. Marco clapped his hands together, his charm back in full force. See, Daphne, he said, smiling at her. I told you your sister was the best. You're a lifesaver. Agatha, truly. I walked them to the door, the mask back in place. They were leaving, thinking they had won, thinking they had me right where they wanted me. But I knew better now. I had the upper hand, and they had no idea what was coming. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned against it, my heart pounding. The adrenaline surged through me, leaving me trembling. I wasn't their fool anymore. Not anymore. For the past 3 weeks, I had been planning. The truth is, I'd known something wasn't right the moment they knocked on my door that first time, but I didn't react immediately. No. I waited. I took a step back and observed. I let them believe they could still pull one over on me. I wasn't about to fall into their trap, not this time. They had been playing me for months, treating me like I was some kind of convenient safety net. But I wasn't a fool. Not anymore. It was like something inside me snapped. And as I sat there in my apartment that night, watching them sit on my sofa, looking all panicked and desperate, I realized just how much I had been underestimating myself. I had always been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who cleaned up the messes. But for the past 3 weeks, I had been quietly building a plan, and now the moment had arrived. The moment they walked into my apartment, thinking they were going to walk all over me, was the moment I had been preparing for. I had everything I needed. They thought they were in control, but they had no idea what was coming. I had the documents, the evidence, and the cold, hard truth. And I was about to hand it all to them, piece by piece. You see, when I say I had been preparing for 3 weeks, I mean it. The moment I overheard their conversation at Dad's birthday party, that conversation where Marco, with his smooth, rehearsed charm, and Daphne, with her entitled whining, had laughed about how dumb I was, something clicked. That was when I realized they had been playing me for a fool. And I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. I had been paying their rent for 8 months. 8 months of scraping by, working overtime, canceling my own plans just so they could live in their trendy loft. 8 months of doing everything I could to help them get on their feet, while they sat back, relaxed, and thought I wouldn't notice that they were living beyond their means. That's when I decided to start keeping records. I knew, deep down, that I wasn't just being used for money. They were taking advantage of my kindness, my sense of responsibility, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. I had set up a folder on my computer, one titled Family. Inside it was a subfolder labeled Daphne Loans. Every month, I transferred them $2,000, and every month, I sent Daphne an email with a PDF attached titled Personal Loan Agreement Month X. Simple, clear, and to the point. Each document was signed by Daphne electronically, with a little heart emoji at the end of her signature, like it was all some kind of joke. But the truth was, in those documents, they were legally binding, and they were evidence. Evidence that could hold up in court if it ever came to that. For 8 months, I had been keeping track. Every single month, I sent them the money. And every single month, I had them sign an agreement. I knew they would never pay me back. But I also knew that one day, I would have to confront them. And when that day came, I was going to have the truth. I was going to have everything they had taken from me, laid out in front of them. So, I made sure to collect everything I could. I backed up the loan agreements, of course, but I didn't stop there. I knew that Marco wasn't just a startup founder, he was a con artist. And I wasn't going to let him play me like I was some naive, gullible woman. I dug deep. I started with Linklight, the so-called startup Marco was running. I visited their website, and at first, it all looked so sleek, so professional. But something didn't sit right. I wasn't a tech person, but I knew when something didn't feel authentic. So, I started to dig deeper. I checked out the Meet the Team page. It was filled with stock photos, generic images of happy, smiling people in offices. The lead developer was a man with a wide grin in an office setting. His name, Smiling Man in Office. I kid you not. The head of marketing was an enthusiastic millennial, holding a laptop, his face full of ambition. But there was nothing real about them. It was a facade. I wasn't about to stop there. Though, I ran a business registry search in our state. I checked every variation of the name Linklight. Nothing. No LLC. No incorporated. No business registration. It didn't exist. Marco had built a beautiful website. Sure, but it was just that. A website. There was no business behind it. It was a shell, a front. He wasn't a tech mogul. He wasn't disrupting any industry. He was a man playing a game, hoping to con enough people into believing in him so he could scrape by. But I didn't stop there either. I wasn't about to let him get away with this. I looked up Marco's name, his real name, and ran a background check. I didn't expect much, maybe a few red flags, but what I found shook me. Marco had a string of failed businesses behind him. There were 2 small claims court judgments against him for unpaid debts to vendors. There was an eviction from an apartment 2 years ago. But the biggest shock? His marital status. Marco was still married. He had been separated from his wife for 3 years, but the divorce had never been finalized. I found the court records. His wife had filed for divorce, but Marco had stalled the entire process. He had disappeared, not responding to the summons. He wasn't just a failed businessman. He was a bigamist. He'd been living a lie, and he was planning to bring Daphne into it. I printed out the background check, the stock photo results, the court records, and I saved everything. I put it all in a folder, neatly organized, waiting for the right moment. I had the loan agreements, which were my leverage, and I had the truth about Marco, which was my nuclear option. Everything they had been hiding, everything they thought they could keep buried, I was going to bring it to light. For 3 weeks, I waited. I went to work. I did my job. I paid my bills. I transferred money into my condo fund, slowly but surely, building up the savings I had always dreamed of. But I also waited for the inevitable. I knew they would come to me again. I knew it was only a matter of time before they showed up, desperate, demanding I fix their mess. And when they did, I would be ready. I would be more than ready. I would have the truth, and I would take control of the situation once and for all. When the night finally came, when they showed up at my door, desperate and demanding, I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to react emotionally. I wasn't going to let them twist the story or make me feel guilty. I was done. I had been playing their game for far too long, and I was done. I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. So when they walked in, expecting me to cave, to immediately pull out my checkbook and fix everything, I stood firm. I had prepared for this moment. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And as I stood there, facing them with all of the evidence in front of me, I realized just how much power I had taken back. "You two," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You thought you could get away with all of this, but you didn't count on me. You didn't count on me seeing through your lies." I pulled out the loan agreements first, one by one, laying them out on the table. "You've been signing these for 8 months. Daphne," I said, my voice steady. "Every month, without even thinking about it. But you know what? You didn't think I would keep track. You didn't think I would have proof." I watched her face pale as she looked down at the documents, the weight of what she had done sinking in. Marco tried to brush it off, tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't having it. I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of this. "And then there's Marco," I said, pulling out the background check and the court records. I tossed the papers onto the table, one after another. "You're not the startup founder you claim to be. You're not some genius entrepreneur. You're a fraud, a liar. And you've been using Daphne, using me, to cover up your failures." Marco's face turned pale as he started to panic. He tried to gather the papers, tried to snatch them from the table, but I was quicker. "You can't erase the truth," I said, my voice low and cold. "You're already married, Marco. You can't marry Daphne. You never could." The silence that followed was deafening. I let it sit, let it hang in the air, and I watched as a realization hit them. Daphne, who had once been so sure of herself, so confident in her manipulation, was now silent, her eyes wide, unable to speak. Marco, too, was speechless, his confident demeanor crumbling in the face of the truth. "Now," I said, stepping closer, "you're going to pay me back every single penny you owe me, and you're going to do it properly. No more games." The silence stretched out between us, thick and heavy. I can feel it. The weight of everything that had been said, everything that had been exposed. The loan agreements, the background check, the court records all laid out on the table for them to see. Daphne, once so confident in her ability to manipulate, now sat there in stunned silence, staring at the evidence in front of her. She couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't act like this was some misunderstanding. The truth was out. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, the calmness in the room shattered. Daphne's face crumpled, her mask of control falling apart like cheap fabric. She had always been the one who could turn on the charm, the one who could make people feel sorry for her. But in that moment, none of it mattered. None of it worked. She didn't have her act together anymore. She didn't have a way to talk her way out of this one. Daphne's breath hitched, and I watched her fight to keep herself composed. But it was futile. She let out a choked sob, her hands trembling as she wiped at her eyes. You can't do this," she whimpered, her voice cracky. "You can't just..." I didn't let her finish. She wasn't going to manipulate me with her tears. Not anymore. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly, but with a firm resolve that made her flinch. "I didn't make you lie. I didn't make you steal from me. This is your doing." Her eyes shot up to meet mine, wide with desperation, her voice rising in a panic. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought it would all work out." She sounded so small, so vulnerable, but I knew better than to buy into it. This wasn't the same sister I'd been taking care of for years. This was someone who had been playing a game and was now losing. She leaned forward, grabbing my wrist in a frantic motion, as if she could shake me into understanding, into forgiveness. Her fingers dug into my skin, desperate and tight, as if she was begging for me to see things her way. Please, Aggie, please. I didn't want any of this to happen. I didn't want to be in this position. I swear, I thought it would get better. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch, not even when she touched me. But I didn't look at her either. I just stared at the table, at the documents. It didn't get better, I said, my voice low but unwavering. You thought I would fix everything for you, didn't you? You thought I'd just keep bailing you out, without question. But that's not how this works anymore. She let go of my wrist, her hand trembling as she slowly withdrew it. She sat back, her face twisted in disbelief, her mouth open as if she couldn't find the words. And then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, she said the words that stung more than I ever expected. You're doing this to me, Aggie. You're destroying me. You've ruined everything. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The woman who had been my sister, the one I had always protected, always taken care of. And for the first time, I realized something. This wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that she had decided to live a life of delusion, to believe that I would always be there to clean up her messes. I wasn't the one who had chosen to lie, to manipulate, to avoid responsibility. No, Daphne, I said, my voice cutting through the air. You ruined everything. You made your own choices. You decided to live in a fantasy, and now you have to face the consequences. Her face twisted in anger, her voice rising again as she stood up, pacing in agitation. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You always have. You always think you're the responsible one, the one who's got it all together. You've never been happy. Aggie, you're a miserable, boring woman who doesn't know how to live. Her words were venomous, dripping with spite, as if she were trying to turn the tables, trying to make me feel guilty for everything she had done. I felt her words hit me, but I didn't flinch. You want to talk about miserable Daphne? I asked, my voice now steely, unshakable. You've been living in a fantasy world, thinking I was just going to foot the bill for your mistakes. You think I've been the one holding you back. No. You've been holding yourself back. You've been so focused on what you wanted that you didn't even see the reality around you. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done being your fool. She stopped in her tracks, her mouth hanging open, her chest heaving as she stared at me with a mix of disbelief and rage. For a second, I saw the cracks in her mask, the fear creeping in. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to cry, to beg me to fix everything, to make it all go away. But that wasn't going to happen anymore. I wasn't going to let it. You think you're going to make me pay you back? She spat, her voice dripping with bitterness. After all this, after everything I've done for you, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I do. I expect you to pay me back every cent you owe. Starting now. Her face turned pale, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She had thought she could manipulate me, thought she could twist the situation to her advantage. But the longer she stood there, the more I saw it. The truth was finally hitting her. She'd been living in her own little bubble, thinking that she could just take and never give back. And now, she was facing the consequences. Daphne's eyes welled with tears again, but these weren't the crocodile tears she had shed earlier. These were real tears, born out of desperation. Please, Aggie, I don't know what to do. I can't pay you back. I don't have the money. What am I supposed to do? Her voice cracked, and I could hear the panic rising in her throat. But I didn't give in. I couldn't. You're going to work for it, Daphne. You're going to get a real job, not some Etsy shop. A job where you actually have to show up and do the work. You're going to make payments to me until that $16,000 is paid off, and not a penny less. She staggered back, her face pale, her eyes wide. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. For a moment, I thought she might try to argue, to fight back, but then something shifted in her. Her shoulders slumped, and she took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for what was to come. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered, her voice raw. I'm your sister. Please, I didn't move. I didn't say anything for a long moment, just watching her, waiting for her to process it all. When she finally met my eyes, the fury that had once been there was gone, replaced by something else, something much colder. You're right, I said, my voice unwavering. You're my sister. And because of that, I'm giving you two choices. One, you work and pay me back. Or two, you figure it out on your own. She stood there, frozen, looking at me as if she couldn't believe what was happening. The anger, the blame, the manipulation, it all faded away. She couldn't fight it anymore. The truth had come out, and she couldn't ignore it. With a final, shaky breath, she turned away from me, her face hardening into a mask of quiet fury. I'll figure it out, she said, her voice low and filled with venom. I'll go to Dad. He'll understand. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was done trying to save her from herself. I had done enough. I had given her the tools to survive, and now it was time for her to learn the hard way. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady. But remember, Daphne, I have proof. You just have a story. With that, she stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door behind her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The silence that followed was profound. I had taken control, and Daphne had no idea what was coming next. I wasn't her safety net anymore. She would have to face the consequences. And this time, I wouldn't be there to save her. The next day, I went to Dad's house. I needed to talk to him before Daphne could spin her version of events, before she could paint me as the villain. I found him in his workshop, covered in sawdust, carefully sanding down a rocking chair he'd been working on for months. When he saw me, his face lit up with that familiar warmth. Aggie, what a surprise. Honey, come to see the old man. I stood there for a moment, taking in the sight of him. Always so steady, so grounded, but today, I knew I needed to be the one to hold it all together. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with the weight of everything I had to say. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to talk to you about something. It's about Daphne. His smile faltered, and he turned off the sander, his face dropping into concern. Is she okay? She called me last night, hysterical, said you two had a terrible fight. I nodded slowly, feeling the gravity of the moment. She and Marco are being evicted, I said simply. I stopped paying their rent. He stared at me, stunned. You were paying their rent for how long? Aggie. 8 months. Dad, $16,000. The weight of the number seemed to hit him all at once, and I could see the shock in his eyes. 16,000, he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. He leaned back against the workbench, his hands trembling slightly as he processed the enormity of what I had just said. I know, I said, my voice quiet. But Dad, that's not even the worst of it. I told him everything, the loan agreements, Marco's fraudulent business, the background check, and everything I had uncovered. I showed him the evidence, one document at a time, and watched as his expression shifted from confusion to anger, then to sadness. His heart, the one that had always been full of warmth and understanding, now burned with a quiet rage that matched my own. When I finished, he took a deep breath and looked at me. His voice was steady, but the emotion was there. You did the right thing, Aggie. It took guts to stand up to them. He paused, his eyes softening as he reached out to pull me into a hug. You're my daughter, you're strong, you're good, and I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. I closed my eyes, letting his support wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I had his backing, and that meant everything. But even as we stood there, together, I knew that Daphne's reality was about to change. She would have to face the consequences of her actions, and for the first time, she would have to stand on her own. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was just the responsible older sister, always cleaning up the messes, always doing the right thing, even when it meant sacrificing my own happiness. But somewhere along the way, I realized that being the reliable one doesn't mean I have to keep letting people take advantage of me. That I don't have to be the one who cleans up everyone else's mess. I've learned that standing up for myself doesn't make me selfish. It doesn't make me cold. It makes me strong. And for the first time in my life, I'm taking control. I'm not the helpless one in this story anymore. I'm the one who's setting boundaries, who's demanding respect, and who's choosing to put myself first. As for Daphne, well, things didn't go the way she thought they would. The consequences of her actions were inevitable, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the realization that the world doesn't revolve around her, and that you can't live a life based on manipulation and lies without facing the fallout. It's been hard, but in a way, it was the wake-up call she needed. She's learning, albeit the hard way, that there are real-world consequences for everything. And maybe, just maybe, she'll come out of this a little stronger. Or maybe not. Only time will tell. If you enjoyed hearing my story, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps out. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. I've got plenty more to share, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.